Your mind is always running through what could happen tomorrow, and none of it feels good. That constant worry, that background noise, it just takes your energy. It takes your peace, but there's this old idea, a counterintuitive technique. It's meant to quiet that noise. The Roman philosopher Seneca, he had this advice. He said we should rehearse misfortune in our minds, the whole course of it. At first, that sounds like the worst possible thing to do, but this practice the Stoics called it negative visualization. It's not about pessimism. It's a tool, a profound one, for building mental fortitude, something unshakable. So by the end, you'll have a method, a clear one, actionable, to turn anxiety into preparedness, to turn fear into appreciation. We're going to see how walking through potential losses in your mind can actually make you more grateful for what you have right now, and how this strange exercise can immunize your mind against the shocks life inevitably brings. So think about one comfort in your life, one thing that feels so permanent you don't even notice it's there anymore. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum. That's Latin for the premeditation of evils, but the word evil is a bit misleading now. It didn't mean something morally dark to them. It just meant things that go against us, the hardships, the setbacks, the losses that happen in a life. So it's not dwelling on doom, it's the opposite. It's a structured rehearsal. It's like the difference between an athlete visualizing a race and someone just lying awake worrying. One is a tool, the other is a trap. Seneca was clear on this. He said, cultivating gratitude, but the Stoics took it a step further, into a realm that builds something far more durable than just appreciation. They used it to forge resilience. The Stoics saw a contradiction. They thought that by thinking about losing what you love, you could actually become stronger. It seems backwards. We usually push those thoughts away, but they understood that our deepest fears have power over us because we refuse to look at them. They stay in the shadows and they grow, so the practice is to shine a light on them. That's negative visualization. You confront a feared scenario in your own mind. You take a passive what if and you turn it into an active if this then. You write the script for your response before life gives you the situation. And in doing that, you disarm the event's greatest weapon, which is surprise and the panic that comes with it. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea. He told himself not to picture your whole life and all its troubles at once, but in each instance to ask, what here is actually unbearable? What is beyond endurance? You'll find you're ashamed to admit defeat. This wasn't about ignoring difficulty. It was about breaking it down. By facing the possibility, he found most of the weight wasn't in the event itself, but in the dread around it. He was practicing an acceptance of life's impermanence, not with despair, but with a clear-eyed readiness. Think of a fire drill. In a well-run building, nobody pretends a fire will never happen. That would be foolish. Instead, they practice. They walk the routes calmly. They locate the exits. When the alarm sounds for real, there's urgency but less blind panic. The path is known. The mind has a map. Negative visualization is a fire drill for the soul. You walk the mental route of a potential loss, not because you want the fire, but because you want to know you can find your way through the smoke. You prepare your inner response so if hardship arrives, your first reaction isn't terror but a remembered path. So make it personal. Identify one quiet fear you avoid giving mental space. It doesn't have to be a catastrophe. It could be a professional setback, a disagreement, a minor failure. Just identify it. Now ask yourself, why do I avoid thinking about this? Is the thought itself too painful, or do I believe thinking it might make it more likely? Sit with that for a second. The Stoic exercise begins there, in noticing the avoidance. Because the rehearsal changes everything. It doesn't summon the event. It prepares the person who would have to face it. For the Stoics, this was daily mental training. They built these exercises into their lives long before words like resilience or mindfulness existed. Two figures stand out: Seneca, the wealthy advisor, and Marcus Aurelius, the emperor. They used the same core tool, but for different landscapes. Seneca used negative visualization as a shield for personal peace. He had a morning ritual. He'd start the day by mentally reviewing the irritations he might face: the crowded streets, a rude colleague, delayed plans. By foreseeing these minor things, he aimed to meet them not with fresh anger, but with a mind that was ready. He wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. This practice was his way of reducing that imagined suffering. It was about inoculating his daily peace against life's friction. Marcus Aurelius used the same practice for leadership. His private writings, the Meditations, are filled with this rehearsed acceptance. He would remind himself the people he'd meet might be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. But he had rehearsed this. He told himself to meet them not with surprise, but with the understanding that this is how some people are. He applied it to larger burdens too. The temporary nature of his power, his health, his life. For him, it was a tool to bear the weight of duty without being crushed. He was preparing his character to remain steady, no matter what the empire threw at him. Between them lived Epictetus, a former slave turned teacher. He provided the foundation. He drew a line, a simple distinction. Some things are within our control, he said. Our opinions, our desires, our actions. Most everything else is not. Our reputation, our wealth, our health. Negative visualization works because it trains us to focus our energy on what is within our control. Our own judgment and response. By mentally rehearsing the loss of things outside our control, we are not cursing ourselves. We are practicing the art of letting go of our attachment to them. So we can hold firmly to our own virtue and reason, which can never be taken. So consider their approaches. Seneca's focus was the personal, the daily. A buffer against life's annoyances. Marcus Aurelius used it for the grand scale, to shoulder history with grace. Their contexts were worlds apart, but their tool was identical. This tells us something. The practice isn't about your circumstances. It's about your relationship to them, which application resonates, preparing for the small disruptions of your day, or building strength for the larger responsibilities you carry. Their ancient minds point to a modern truth. Mental preparedness is a discipline. It begins with a choice to look clearly at what could be, so you can act wisely with what is. Negative visualization builds a kind of buffer. It trains your emotional immune system. Think of a vaccine. You get a small, controlled dose of a weakened virus. Your body learns to recognize it, to fight it. So if you ever encounter the real thing, you're prepared. You have antibodies. This is the mental version of that. By calmly exposing your mind to the idea of a setback, you're giving your psyche a controlled dose of adversity. You're building emotional antibodies. Then, if the real event happens, the shock is less. The panic is quieter because part of you has already been there. That's why Seneca's point is so sharp. He said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The dread of something usually hurts more than the thing itself. By spending time in that imagined space on purpose, we drain its power. We move the suffering from chaotic imagination into managed contemplation. Modern psychology has something similar called stress inoculation training. It's a therapy technique where people are gradually exposed to manageable stress in a safe environment. It builds their capacity for bigger challenges. The Stoics were pioneers of this. They used the theater of their own minds as the training ground. They understood desensitization, not to become numb, but to create clarity. When you're not blinded by that first flash of fear, you can see the situation for what it is, and you can see your own resources for handling it. Take a practical example, like a difficult conversation you need to have. Maybe giving feedback to a colleague or talking to a family member. The anxiety before can be crippling. Your mind runs through every bad outcome, every angry word. That's uncontrolled negative visualization, and it exhausts you. The Stoic method would be to sit down beforehand and deliberately rehearse the possibilities. Not to dwell on the fear, but to map the territory. Imagine the other person reacting defensively. What would your calm response be? Imagine the conversation going in circles. What gentle pivot could you make? Imagine it ending with no resolution. How would you accept that with grace? By walking through these scenarios calmly, you're not predicting doom. You're preparing your composure. You're inoculating yourself against the shock of a negative reaction, so you can stay present during the actual talk. Now think about your own experience, a past hardship that caught you completely by surprise, a sudden job loss, unexpected news, a conflict that came out of nowhere. Remember that first gut punch moment of shock. How much of your initial suffering was about the event itself, and how much was about the sheer surprise of it? The feeling of the rug being pulled out. Now consider if you had even briefly entertained the possibility that such a thing could happen, not dwelled on it but just acknowledged it could. How might that have changed your first reaction? You'd still feel the weight of the event, but maybe without the added vertigo of total shock. Your mind might have found its footing a little faster. That's the shield. It doesn't stop the blow from landing, but it keeps you from being knocked completely off balance. It lets you meet adversity not as a bewildered victim, but as someone who, in some small way, saw it coming and is ready to respond. Gratitude, that deep feeling, not just a passing thought. For most of us, it's rare. It usually needs a contrast. You notice the warmth when you've just come in from the cold. That's the hidden mechanism. The Stoics had a practice, the contrast principle. Our sense of value isn't absolute. It's shaped by comparison. You walk out into the cold mentally. You imagine a loss, and when you come back to the present, your senses are heightened. You see what was always there but had become invisible. That's how negative visualization works. It cultivates gratitude. That's not a side effect. It's the entire point. Marcus Aurelius did this. He'd start his mornings with it. He wrote to himself, "Think of what a privilege it is to be alive. To breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He said that knowing the day would bring difficult people, tedious duties, he wasn't ignoring the potential for hardship. He was using it, using the possibility to frame the gift of the morning. The potential challenge made the present privilege more vivid. Valuing the present is an art. It requires a conscious act of contrast. You hold the possibility of absence in one hand, the reality of presence in the other, the space between them. That's where gratitude lies. You can try it, a simple exercise. Think of a routine comfort, something so embedded you never consider it. Running water. Just for a moment, play out a day without it. No quick shower, no easy glass from the tap, the inconvenience. Then let that thought go. Come back. The faucet still works. That mental contrast can transform a utility into a marvel. You didn't change the water, you changed your perception of it. That's the practical magic. It works with anything, your ability to walk, the safety of your street. The company of a pet, a quiet morning. By imagining its absence, you perform an alchemy on the ordinary. You turn taking things for granted into genuine thankfulness. So take a breath, make a quick mental list, don't overthink it. What are 3 ordinary things right now that you're grateful for? Maybe the chair supporting you, the device letting you hear this. A few quiet minutes to think. Notice how just asking the question shifts your attention. It pulls you out of abstract worries about tomorrow, plants you in the tangible gifts of today. That's the flip side of mental preparedness. By preparing for what we might lose, we become aware of what we hold. And that awareness, that sustained gratitude, becomes a strength. It's a foundation. It doesn't shake easily because you're not building your peace on the assumption everything will stay the same. You're building it on a clear-eyed awareness of what is here right now, and from that solid ground you can face what may come. this isn't about living in fear. It's not about expecting the worst. That difference is everything. The line between a Stoic exercise and an anxious spiral is thin, but it's the difference between building a shield and being wounded by your own thoughts. One is a tool you control, the other is a trap. It controls you. Negative visualization is deliberate, it's brief, it's a purposeful rehearsal. You decide when to start. You decide when to stop. The goal is clear: build resilience, build appreciation. Anxious rumination is the opposite. It feels involuntary, it drags on. Its only purpose seems to be to drain you. It's the difference between a firefighter checking their gear and someone paralyzed by the smell of smoke. Epictetus gave us the key. He said it's not events that disturb us, it's our judgments about them. And then he offered the method: don't be disturbed by the first impression. That raw mental picture of a loss, instead pause, say to it, you are just an impression. You are not necessarily the thing you claim to be. Then examine it. Examine it with your reason. That's the core of the distinction. Catastrophizing believes the impression. It believes it without question. It runs with the story of ruin. The Stoic practice interrogates the impression. It asks, is this within my control? If not, what is my chosen response? The emotion isn't the enemy. The unexamined emotion is. See it in practice. An anxious thought says, I might lose my job and everything will be ruined. It's a sentence that ends in a void. It triggers fear. Helplessness, a sense of doom. The Stoic rehearsal starts from the same place but takes a different path. It says, if I lost my job, what practical steps could I take first? Who could I talk to? What skills do I have that I could transfer? What temporary adjustments could I make? It doesn't deny the difficulty, it engages with it. Proactively, one thought spirals inward. It focuses on the feeling of ruin, the other spirals outward. It maps a landscape of potential action and inner resources. One is passive suffering, the other is active preparation. Think of a worrying thought you get stuck in. Maybe it's about a relationship, a financial concern. A health worry, notice how it feels in your mind. It likely loops. It repeats the same frightening outcomes. It offers no new insight. It feels heavy. Sticky, now contrast that with setting a timer. Setting a timer for 5 minutes to deliberately consider that same topic. In those 5 minutes, you are not a victim of the thought. You are its investigator. You might ask, what's the worst realistic outcome? What's the best? What's most likely? What part of this can I influence right now? The mere act of structuring the inquiry changes your relationship to the fear. You move from being immersed in the storm to observing it from a sheltered place. That's the detachment the Stoics spoke of, not coldness, clarity. It's observing the possibility of loss without letting the observation consume you. You look at the thought, you don't become the thought. That space, that pause between impression and reaction, that's where your freedom lies. It's where practice is forged and panic is disarmed. By choosing to visit these ideas on your own terms, you reclaim the territory your worries have occupied. You stop being a passive tenant of your own anxious mind. You become its architect, building rooms of preparedness where there were only hallways of dread. And from that foundation, that mental clarity, you can begin to apply this. Not just to fears, but to the fabric of your daily life. The Stoics had this mental footnote they'd attach to things. They called it the reserve clause. It's like saying fate permitting in your mind after any plan you make. And it wasn't about doubt, it was a kind of honesty. You do everything you can toward a goal, but you accept that the final outcome isn't fully yours to command. This clause goes with negative visualization. One prepares you for loss, the other prepares you for the plan going off course. Together they create a flexible intention. You act with full effort, but without this brittle expectation that the world has to follow your blueprint. Seneca put it well. He compared it to a skilled sailor. A good sailor sets the sails, steers the ship, uses all their knowledge and strength, but they know they don't control the wind or the waves. They commit to the journey, fate permitting. If a storm comes, they don't rage at the sea. They adapt, they change course, secure the ship, use their skill within the new reality. The goal wasn't to reach the original destination at all costs. The goal was to navigate wisely, whatever conditions came up. The reserve clause turns a rigid plan into a living intention. It separates your effort, which you control, from the result, which you often don't. Take something simple like planning a picnic. Without the clause, your thought is, I will have a picnic in the park tomorrow at noon. Your happiness gets tied to that. When clouds gather, your mood darkens. With a clause, your intention becomes, I'll prepare the food and go to the park tomorrow, fate permitting. You've done your part. You made the sandwiches, packed the blanket, but you've made space for reality. If it rains, you're not defeated. You're just presented with a different scenario. You adapt. You have an indoor picnic on the living room floor. The enjoyment wasn't in the perfect weather. It was in the shared meal, the break from routine. The clause protected your peace by freeing you from a single, fragile script. This applies everywhere. You prepare thoroughly for a job interview, fate permitting. You commit to being kind in a conversation, fate permitting. You train for a race, fate permitting. In each case, you pour your best energy into the actions you control. Your preparation, your attitude, your focus. The clause just acknowledges the vast network of factors you don't control. The other candidates, the mood of the person you're talking to, a sudden injury. It stops that frustration that comes from believing the world owes you a specific result for your effort. Your effort is its own reward. The outcome is a separate event. So take one of your plans for this week, a work goal, a social event, a personal project. Now mentally add those two words, fate permitting, to the end of it. Notice what shifts. Does it feel like giving up power or like claiming a deeper kind of power? The power to strive without desperation, to care without clinging. That subtle shift is where aspiration meets serenity. You're no longer building your happiness on a future event that may or may not happen. You're building it on the quality of your own actions right now. And from that stable foundation, you can engage with the world not as a demand but as a dialogue. Change is the only constant, and the Stoic mind is prepared for that. But it's not a passive acceptance, it's an active cultivation. They called it equanimity, a calm and stable mind, a mind that isn't thrown off balance by the flux of everything. Negative visualization is the training ground for that. You rehearse change, and you reduce your inner resistance to it. You stop fighting the current. You learn to flow with the river. Marcus Aurelius returned to that image. He wrote that the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. He saw the world as a rushing river, carrying events past us in a constant flow. To stand rigid against that current, to demand it stop, that's the source of distress. The alternative isn't to give up, it's to swim, to use the current, to navigate it with skill. Equanimity is that skill. It's the inner posture that lets you meet each new wave. Not with panic, with a steady breath, a clear eye. Think about change in your own life. Some changes are chosen. A new job, moving to a new city, many more are not. A project gets cancelled, a friend moves away, a technology you rely on becomes obsolete. Our first reaction is often a subtle rebellion. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't what I planned. That internal protest, that clenching against reality, creates the turmoil. The event itself is just an event. Our struggle against it is the suffering. The practice works by loosening that grip of expectation. When you regularly contemplate that your circumstances are temporary, you stop building your sense of self on such shaky ground. You build it instead on your capacity to adapt, on your character, on your reasoned choices. Those are things the river cannot wash away. Consider a modern example. The rapid pace of technological change. A platform you use gets overhauled overnight. The familiar buttons are gone. The workflow is disrupted. Without a prepared mind, the reaction can be intense frustration. A sense of being unfairly inconvenienced. With a mind trained in equanimity, the reaction shifts. You acknowledge the inconvenience, but you see it as part of the landscape. You might think, well, this is how it is now. Let me explore the new layout. Let me see what this change makes possible. The energy spent on resistance is redirected into learning. The change is the same. Your relationship to it is transformed. This applies to personal relationships. People grow, priorities shift. A close friendship may naturally evolve into something more distant. The unprepared mind meets this with a sense of betrayal or loss. It clings to the past version. The mind practiced in accepting change can feel the sadness, but it doesn't fuel it with stories of permanence broken. It recognizes that all things, even beautiful friendships, have their seasons. It allows the relationship to be what it is now, without the added pain of demanding it be what it once was. This isn't coldness, it's a spacious, graceful acceptance. It preserves peace. So reflect on a recent change that unsettled you, a minor schedule disruption, or a more significant shift. In that moment of unease, what was the core of your reaction? Was it about the new circumstance itself, or was it about the shock of the old circumstance ending? How might a mindset of prepared acceptance have changed your response? A calm acknowledgement that this is simply how things are now. It likely wouldn't have erased the challenge, but it might have freed up a crucial reserve of mental energy. Energy not spent on fighting what is, but on navigating it wisely. That saved energy is the substance of equanimity. It's the quiet power to remain yourself, undisturbed, while the world reshapes itself around you. The most powerful changes start small, almost insignificant. Your first step into this practice isn't about life's grand tragedies. It's about the minor friction of an ordinary day. You train the mind where it's easiest, so it's strong for when it's hardest. Think of it like brushing your teeth for your peace of mind. You don't spend an hour, you do it consistently. Consistency over duration. The goal is to build the mental muscle, not to overwhelm it. A brief daily session, maybe just 1 minute to start. Focus on a single minor inconvenience, something small enough that the thought doesn't paralyze you, but real enough to require a slight shift. Seneca had a version of this, a nightly review examining his day. We can adapt that for morning preparation. Instead of looking back, you look forward just a little. You prepare your inner stance for the day's likely friction. The purpose isn't to predict a bad day. It's to ensure no event, however small, can derail a good one. So tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, give yourself 60 seconds. Sit quietly. Bring to mind one minor, realistic hiccup your day might hold. Visualize your commute and imagine unexpected traffic, or a lunch plan getting cancelled, or some mild, constructive criticism on a piece of work. And here's the key. Don't just see the event, rehearse your calm response. In your mind's eye, watch yourself take a deep breath in the stalled car and decide to listen to a podcast. See yourself receiving the changed plans with flexibility, thinking of a quiet alternative. Observe yourself nodding at the feedback, focusing on the useful part. You are scripting your composure. The power isn't in the scenario you choose. It's in the deliberate act of choosing your reaction beforehand. You're installing a software update for your patience. When that minor event happens in real life, your mind won't draw a blank. It will have a faint memory, a neural pathway of a calm alternative. You might still feel the initial flicker of annoyance, but it will pass through you, not stick to you. So the challenge is this: for just 1 minute tomorrow morning, try it. Pick one small thing, walk through it calmly in your mind, then let it go and start your day. Notice if there's a subtle difference in how you meet that first minor obstacle. That slight space between event and reaction, that's where your freedom is built. One quiet minute at a time, Once a week, you pick one of the bigger fears. You bring it into the light. That's the second step. It's a deeper drill. You're moving from daily friction to the bigger shadow. The one that feels like a monster. You don't just peek, you pull it out. You look right at it, and when you look, you almost always see it's less monstrous. This isn't about inviting disaster. It's about disarming the dread that lives in not knowing. The Stoics knew this. A fear examined loses its power. An unexamined fear grows in the dark. The core of it is a shift in the question. You move from what if this happens to if this happens, what would I do? The first question traps you in the feeling. The second question engages your reason. It turns on your problem-solving mind. It makes you inventory your resources, the inner ones and the outer ones. Suddenly, you're not a helpless victim of a hypothetical. You're a strategist looking at a potential challenge. This is where the Stoic idea becomes practical. The obstacle is the way. The imagined obstacle, when you walk up to it, shows you the path around it, or even through it. The fear itself becomes the map. Take a serious health challenge. That's a common, deep fear. The anxious mind spirals on the diagnosis, the pain, the uncertainty, the loss. It stops there. The Stoic drill walks through it calmly. If I got that news, what's the first rational step? I would consult doctors. Who's in my support system to talk to? My partner, my family, close friends. What practical priorities would shift immediately? My schedule, my diet, my commitments. What inner resources could I draw on? My patience, my sense of humor, past times I've overcome difficulty. By walking through these steps, you're not predicting illness. You're showing yourself you are not without a plan. You are not without resources. The terrifying void of what if becomes a navigable landscape of if this, then that. The monster is revealed to be a difficult journey, but one you can prepare for. Apply it to another area, a financial worst case, a significant, unexpected loss. The fear says you'll be ruined on the street, helpless. The drill asks, what would I actually do? You would review all your assets. You would contact creditors, explain the situation. You would look at temporary ways to cut expenses or generate income. You would lean on your network for advice, for temporary support. You would remember times in your past when you adapted with less. The scenario is still difficult, but it's no longer a mythological catastrophe. It's a series of problems, each with potential solutions. Your mind shifts from panic to processing. So this week, name one worst case you're willing to examine. Not to dwell on, but to defang. It could be professional, the failure of a project you've invested in. It could be relational, a painful conflict. It could be personal, a setback in a long-term goal. Write it down if it helps. Then, for just a few minutes, walk the path. Ask the practical questions. If this happened, what's the very first thing I would do? Who could I talk to? What's one small step I could take immediately to stabilize things? What have I overcome before that proves I can handle hardship? You are not summoning the event. You are meeting your own capacity to respond. And in that meeting, you often find a quiet confidence waiting. The shadow on the wall shrinks back to the size of the object casting it. And you are left not with fear, but with a clarified understanding of your own strength. You have to come back to the present. You've walked through that possible loss in your mind. You've felt that contrast, and now you pause. You consciously turn toward what you have. That's the gratitude amplification. It's the deliberate act of savoring. Without this step, the exercise feels incomplete. It could even feel bleak. This step changes it. It turns the mental rehearsal from a lesson in loss into a deep practice of appreciation. It locks in the benefit. Marcus Aurelius mastered this pivot. His writings are full of it. After contemplating the temporary nature of all things, he would then write lines like this. Think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He didn't stop at the thought of impermanence. He used it as a springboard to launch himself into a state of thankfulness for the very moment he was in. The transience he contemplated wasn't a cause for despair. it was the very reason to cherish the now. Because it is fleeting, it is precious. Because it could be otherwise, it is a gift that completes the cycle. The contrast creates the value. The conscious acknowledgement secures it. It's the difference between walking out of a cold wind and simply being inside, and walking out of a cold wind and then truly feeling the warmth of the room. You notice the heat because you felt the chill. The practice makes you the architect of that noticing. Make it practical. Think of a person in your life you deeply value. A friend, a partner, a family member. Follow the first 2 steps. Briefly imagine a scenario where that connection is no longer part of your daily world. Maybe through distance, a disagreement, or the simple passage of time. Don't dwell. Just observe the quiet pang that thought brings. Now, here is the essential 3rd step. Immediately let that thought go and bring your full attention to the reality. This person is in your life. You can call them. You can share a memory. You can feel gratitude for their existence. In that moment, send a text, not a heavy one, a simple, genuine note. I was just thinking about how glad I am we're friends. Or remembering that time we laughed so hard. Thank you for that. The action cements the feeling. It moves the appreciation from your private mind into the shared world. Apply it to an ability, the ability to see, to walk, to hear. Imagine, just for a second, the loss of that faculty, the world dimming or moving becoming a struggle or silence falling. Then open your eyes, look at the light filtering through a window, take a few steps and feel the strength in your legs. Listen to the subtle sounds around you. The hum of a computer, the distant sound of life. That ordinary moment is now infused with a quiet miracle. You didn't gain new sight. You recovered the ability to see what was always there. The power of this 3-step cycle, visualize the contrast, then amplify the gratitude, is that it actively rewires your attention. It trains your mind to scan for gifts, not just threats. It builds a reservoir of positive recognition that can sustain you during actual hardship. Because you have practiced finding the good, you become better at seeing it even when times are hard. So before this day ends, choose one thing, one person, one comfort, one simple ability. Go through the full cycle. Spend 1 minute on the visualization of absence. Then spend 2 minutes actively appreciating the vibrant, living presence of that thing in your life right now. Feel the gratitude. If it feels right, express it. This isn't just a philosophical exercise. It's a direct injection of meaning into the ordinary fabric of your day. You are not waiting for a crisis to appreciate what you have. You are building that appreciation now, brick by mindful brick, creating an unshakable foundation of contentment from which you can face anything. If you knew your time with someone was limited, how would you treat them? That question changes things. It strips away the noise, the petty stuff, the static of taking them for granted. Their presence just becomes a clear fact. This is the deepest use of negative visualization, not to armor yourself, but to open your heart, to love with open hands. The Stoics knew even our deepest bonds change. Relationships evolve, people grow apart, life brings separations. By thinking about that natural flow, you don't build walls. You take down the barriers you already built: assumption, entitlement, inattention. You prepare not for loss, but for a deeper presence now. Seneca wrote about friendship. He said, "Live as if a friend might become an enemy." That sounds cynical at first. But he didn't mean distrust. He meant avoid a blind, fragile attachment that takes the friend for granted. Cherish the friendship itself right now, knowing its precious and changeable nature. Value your friend today without assuming the bond will look the same tomorrow. That mindset doesn't create distance. It creates immense gratitude for the connection you have right now. It turns ordinary time together into something you choose to appreciate. Think about your last minor disagreement with someone you love. A chore left undone, a forgotten errand, a tone of voice. In the moment, that small friction can feel huge. It can fill your attention. Now apply the lens. Mentally fast forward to when that person isn't in your daily life. Not from tragedy, but from a move, a life change, the simple passage of time. Look back at that petty grievance from that future. How small does it seem? How much would you give to have that ordinary, friction-filled day back? This exercise isn't for guilt. It's to recalibrate your focus, to shrink the small annoyances back to their true size, and to enlarge the monumental gift of that person's presence. You can practice this in a structured, gentle way. Set aside a quiet moment to mentally rehearse a loving farewell, a grateful one, not morbid. Picture a family member leaving for a long journey. In your mind, you hug them, you express your love, you wish them well. You play out the scene of them walking away, then you let the thought dissolve. The next time you see that person, notice the difference, the warmth of your greeting, the quality of your attention, the patience in your listening. You've rehearsed their absence to fully inhabit their presence. You've cleared away the clutter of taking them for granted. So try this. Think of one key relationship. A partner, a parent, a close friend. For 1 minute, allow yourself to mentally lose them, not with graphic detail, but with the simple acknowledgement that all relationships change form over time. Sit with the feeling that arises. It might be a pang, a hollow sense. Then let that thought go completely. Bring your attention back to the reality. This person is here in your world. What is one small, specific thing you appreciate about them right now? Their sense of humor, their steady support, a shared memory. That immediate shift from imagined loss to present gratitude is the entire point. It fortifies the bond not by clinging tighter, but by seeing it more clearly. It trains you to love the person in front of you, not the permanent fixture you assume they will always be. And from that clear-eyed, grateful space, every interaction becomes richer. Every petty grievance gets easier to release. The bond itself becomes more resilient because you're no longer building it on the fragile illusion of forever. The mental energy we spend on fear, that anxiety before a big presentation, the dread of a proposal being rejected, the worry that your effort won't be enough. Ambition can become a source of suffering. Negative visualization is a way to reframe that. It asks you to look directly at the possibility of a setback. Not to discourage you, but to clarify what actually matters. Epictetus started his life in servitude. He framed ambition in a powerful way. He said your job is to play your part well. That's all you control. Whether you get applause or promotion or recognition, that's not your part. That's for others to decide. When you visualize a professional failure, you're rehearsing that truth. You're separating your performance, which you own, from the outcome, which you do not. This practice doesn't kill ambition. It purifies it. It shifts your focus from the trophy you might win to the person you become in the effort to win it. Take a practical scenario. You've worked for months on a key project. The launch is next week. The anxious mind spins on all that could go wrong. A competitor beats you to market. The client hates the final product. The launch falls flat. That's uncontrolled worry. The Stoic application is deliberate. You set aside 10 minutes. You calmly walk through one of those scenarios. You visualize the project failing to meet its goals. You sit with that idea. Then you ask the clarifying questions. If this project failed, what skills did I build that I still have? My problem-solving ability, my capacity to lead a team under pressure, my technical knowledge. What relationships did I strengthen that remain? My integrity in how I handled the process, the respect of colleagues who saw me work diligently. The failure of the outcome cannot take those things from you. They are yours. They are the real yield of your labor. This mental rehearsal does something. It detaches your sense of worth from a binary result. Your value isn't in the promotion letter. It's in the competence and character you develop to be eligible for it. By facing the possibility of not getting the promotion, you stop clinging to it as a source of validation. You can then pursue it with full effort but with a serene understanding. Your peace isn't held hostage by the committee's decision. You play your part well. The rest is not your part, so reflect on your own professional life. What part of your identity or goal are you most attached to? Is it the job title, the salary bracket, the prestige of a certain role? Now ask yourself, if that was stripped away tomorrow, what would remain? Not in terms of financial pressure, but in terms of your core self. Your work ethic, your creativity, your ability to learn, your resilience. Those are the unshakable assets. The external trappings are just the circumstances in which you exercise them. By regularly contemplating their temporary nature, you don't work less hard. You work with more freedom. Your ambition is no longer a frantic chase for something outside yourself. It becomes a calm expression of the strengths within you. And from that solid ground, success and setback become different kinds of feedback, not definitions of your worth. We don't usually think about health until something goes wrong. It's just there, like the quiet hum of a machine you only notice when it starts to stutter. And that's where this practice gets personal, applying negative visualization to your own body. To the vessel that carries you through every day. It's not about inviting sickness. It's about ending that silent contract we have, the assumption it will always work this way. By acknowledging its fragility, you don't become fearful, you become attentive, you become grateful, and you build a kind of resilience for the changes time brings. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, was constantly reminded of his own physical limits. He had chronic health issues, stomach pains, other ailments. His private writings don't complain about them. They reframe them. He wrote that the mind can keep its own calm, its own citadel, even if the body is in discomfort. He focused on the sovereignty of his judgment. His body could feel pain, but his mind could choose not to be defined by it. That's the core insight. By contemplating the body's impermanence, you strengthen your connection to what's more durable, your character, your perspective, your will. You prepare not just for illness, but for aging with a kind of grace. So try a brief exercise. Pick one ordinary function, the ability to walk across a room. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that function is gone. Not forever, but for a day. Visualize the simple act of getting a glass of water becoming a monumental task. Feel the frustration, the reliance on others, the longing for that lost ease. Now open your eyes, stand up if you can, take 3 steps, feel the muscles in your legs work, the balance in your body, the freedom of that movement. That ordinary act is now a small miracle. You haven't gained new legs, you've recovered the awareness of the ones you have. Apply it to your senses. Imagine the world going silent. The loss of hearing a loved one's voice or your favorite piece of music. Sit in that imagined quiet for a breath. Then listen, really listen to the subtle sounds in your space right now. The tone of this voice, the distant sound of life outside, the quiet hum of electricity. That background noise is the soundtrack of a connected life. By contemplating its absence, you hear its presence with new depth. This practice does 2 things. First, it sparks an immediate, visceral gratitude that can change how you care for your body now. You might choose the healthier meal, take the walk, prioritize sleep, not as a chore, but as an act of honoring this temporary gift. Second, it builds a quiet courage. If a health challenge does arise, the initial shock is lessened. You've already, in a small way, made peace with the fact that the body is not a fortress. It's a garden, it requires tending, and it has its seasons. You've rehearsed focusing not on what is lost, but on what remains, the power of your mind, the depth of your spirit, the support around you. So right now, bring your attention to one specific, healthy function of your body. It could be the ease of your breath filling your lungs, the clarity of your sight as you read these words, the strength in your hands as they hold your device. Just for a few seconds, don't just acknowledge it, thank it. Feel a genuine appreciation for this silent, loyal machinery that lets you experience the world. That feeling, that direct line to gratitude, is a form of wellness in itself. It's the beginning of caring for the gift while calmly accepting that all gifts in time are returned. For the Stoic, imagination is a tool, and reason is what uses it. That's the difference between a mental exercise and just falling into anxiety. Negative visualization isn't letting your fears run wild. It's a deliberate process, structured, led by reason. Reason sets the boundaries, it directs the inquiry. It draws the useful conclusions. Without reason as the pilot, the ship of what if just drifts into a storm of emotion. The Stoic goal was to live in accordance with nature. And a core part of human nature, they believed, is rational thought. To use this practice properly is to use reason as it was designed. You take the raw material of a frightening possibility, and you analyze it with a calm, almost scientific detachment. An emotion-led visualization feels like being swept away. Your heart races, your mind fixates on the worst-case imagery. You end up drained, helpless. A reason-led visualization feels like conducting an investigation. You observe the scenario, you ask clear questions, you search for actionable insights. One is a reaction, the other is a response. You can hear this in the Stoic quotes. Epictetus didn't say feel your way through every potential loss. He said examine your impressions. Test them, ask if they are within your sphere of control. That's the work of reason. Marcus Aurelius turned to his own mind as a citadel, a place of judgment that could remain undisturbed. Undisturbed by the chaos outside, he used reason to pass what was truly a hardship from what was merely an inconvenient change. You can see the difference in practice. Facing a financial worry, the emotional voice screams, "I'll be ruined, I'll lose everything." It's a catastrophic conclusion. It offers no way out, it just loops. The voice of reason, guided by this practice, asks different questions. It asks, what are the actual, realistic probabilities here? If the worst realistic outcome occurred, what practical steps would be available to me? What personal virtues could I exercise in that scenario? Frugality, courage, creativity. This line of thinking doesn't deny the difficulty. It engages with it constructively. It moves you from panic to problem solving. Apply this to a social fear like public speaking. The emotional spiral fixates on the feeling of humiliation. Everyone will laugh. I'll forget my words. My face will turn bright red. It's a movie of embarrassment. The reason-led approach acknowledges the nervousness. But then it gets practical. It asks, what's the absolute worst that could reasonably happen? I might stumble over a sentence. Okay, if that happens, what's my prepared response? A simple pause, a breath, a smile, and continue. What's the core message I want to convey that will remain true even if my delivery isn't perfect? By focusing on these rational anchors, you prepare your mind. Not for a performance, but for a communication. The fear of judgment shrinks beside the purpose of sharing an idea. So in your next moment of quiet visualization, pay attention. Pay close attention to who is in the driver's seat. Is it the raw emotion of fear, painting vivid pictures of disaster with no exit? Or is it your calm, reasoning self? Observing the scenario, asking useful questions, mapping the terrain of your own possible responses. That shift in awareness is where the practice transforms. From mental rehearsal into genuine wisdom, you're not just preparing for events, you're training the very faculty that determines how you experience all events. Your own reasoned judgment. This practice can be misused. It's a tool for building strength, but if you use it wrong, it can end up strengthening the anxieties it's supposed to disarm. There are 3 common pitfalls. The first is dwelling too long. You're supposed to make a brief visit to a difficult idea, not move in. Spending too much time in those mental scenarios drains your energy. It turns preparation into rumination, so you set a firm time limit. 5 minutes is usually enough. Use a timer. When it goes off, you conclude the exercise. You bring your focus back to the present. The second pitfall is believing the worst will happen. That's when the practice slips into pessimism. The Stoic aim wasn't to predict doom, but to accept possibility. So you always pair the visualization with the reserve clause, fate permitting. You're exploring a potential path, not forecasting a certain destination. The third pitfall is more subtle. It's using the visualization as an excuse for inaction. You might think, since I've prepared for failure, I don't need to try as hard. That misunderstands the point. The practice prepares your inner resilience for outcomes you can't control, so you can pour your full effort into the actions you can control. Epictetus drew the line here. He said some things are up to us and some things are not. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our actions, these are within our power. Everything else is not. The purpose of mental training is to focus on that first list, on our judgments and our chosen deeds. When we visualize a loss, we're not practicing acceptance of the loss itself, which is outside our control. We're practicing our judgment about it. We're rehearsing our virtuous action in response, which is within our control. Take a practical example. Someone visualizes financial hardship. The pitfall approach is to dwell on the imagery of poverty, the stress, the shame. It becomes a source of fear that paralyzes action. The Stoic correction is to shift the focus. Visualize the same scenario, but immediately ask, what is within my power? My response is within my power. So you mentally walk through the controllable steps. You would review your expenses and create a budget. That's an action. You would identify a skill you could develop. That's an action. You would reach out to your network for advice. That's an action. The visualization is no longer about the frightening state of being poor. It's about the process of navigating a challenge with resourcefulness. The external circumstance is the same in both rehearsals. But one leaves you feeling weak and the other makes you feel capable. So consider a quiet audit of the three pitfalls: overdwelling, slipping into pessimism, or using it as a passive excuse. Which one does your mind lean toward? Just noticing that tendency is the first corrective step. It lets you enter the exercise not as a passive participant, but as a mindful director, guiding your thoughts toward strength and away from the shadows. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics practiced. The mechanisms behind negative visualization are central to effective therapies today. That's not a coincidence. It's a recognition of how the mind works. When you deliberately expose yourself to a feared thought calmly, you're doing a kind of exposure therapy. But it's an internal one, not a fear of heights or spiders, but a fear of a particular outcome. The principle is the same. Through repeated, controlled exposure in a safe mental space, the emotional charge starts to fade. Psychologists call that habituation. Your nervous system learns the thought is not an immediate threat. It's just a thought, and that strips away its power to trigger panic. The Stoics were applying this intuitively, training their minds to meet ideas of loss without being overwhelmed. This connects directly to cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT, a cornerstone of CBT, is cognitive restructuring, identifying and challenging distorted thought patterns. One common distortion is catastrophizing, where the mind leaps from a minor concern to a total disaster. The Stoic exercise of walking through a worst-case scenario is a form of cognitive restructuring. It forces the rational mind to engage. To move from the emotional shout of "this will be terrible" to the reasoned question, if it happens, what then? By examining the scenario step by step, you challenge the distortion. You often find the feared outcome, while difficult, is survivable, and it often comes with resources, options you hadn't considered. In this light, the Stoics were early cognitive therapists. They understood our judgments about events, not the events themselves, are the source of distress, and they developed a daily practice to retrain those judgments. You can see the parallel in a practical scenario. Take public speaking anxiety. A person using a Stoic approach might sit quietly before the event, mentally rehearse a poor reception. Imagine stumbling over words, seeing bored faces, feeling the heat of embarrassment, but they don't stop there. They then visualize pausing, taking a breath, smiling, continuing with the core message. They focus on the fact they would survive the experience, that their worth isn't defined by this single moment. In a CBT session, a therapist might guide a client through a similar process. A behavioral experiment, the client would predict exactly what they fear will happen during the speech, then test that prediction against the actual outcome. Both methods involve facing the fear in a structured way to disprove the catastrophic narrative and build tolerance for uncertainty. This validation from modern science doesn't make the ancient practice less profound. It grounds its power in observable mechanisms of the mind. It tells us this isn't mystical philosophy, it's practical mental technology. The Stoics discovered a way to hack the brain's fear response long before we had the science to explain why it works. Think about your own experience. Can you recall a time you overcame a fear, not by avoiding it, but by gradually facing it? Maybe you were nervous about driving on the highway, and you started with short trips until it felt normal. Or you dreaded a difficult conversation, and you practiced what you would say until the anxiety lessened. That natural process you used shares the same DNA as this Stoic exercise. You were exposing yourself to the feared idea in a controlled way, and in doing so, you rewired your emotional response. You were, in your own way, practicing a form of negative visualization. Recognizing that connection can be empowering. It means you already have an innate capacity for this resilience. The Stoic framework simply gives it a structure, a purpose, a deeper philosophical grounding, turning a useful tactic into a way of life. The Stoics actually suggested visiting the future regularly, which seems backwards. To be present, you think about what's next, but anxiety isn't about now. It's when your mind gets taken somewhere else. You're here, but you're not. You're stuck in a tomorrow that hasn't happened, fighting problems that aren't real yet. Negative visualization is how you go get your mind back. You decide to go to that future yourself. You look at it calmly, and once you've seen it, your mind often just comes back. It returns to where you actually are, to this moment. Marcus Aurelius was always pulling his own attention back. He said to do everything as if it were your last, not with drama but with focus. When you brush your hair, just brush your hair. When you write, just write. The clutter of later things just steals from the simple act in front of you. Seneca said the same. Confine your life to the present. We get tormented by the future because we leave now to go meet it too early. This rehearsal, it stops that. It lets the mind scan the horizon so then it can rest. It can look at what's right here. You feel it with something ordinary. A work project, there's a deadline. The anxious mind is already at the failure. It sees the disappointed client, the criticism, the feeling of not being good enough. That dread sits over your desk. It makes the real work feel heavy. So you try the exercise, set a timer, 2 minutes, walk through the fear, imagine the deadline passing. The project isn't done. You send the email to explain. Then you ask what then. You'd set a new deadline. You'd apologize and make a new plan. Your reputation might get a small scratch, but it would heal. You'd learn the world wouldn't end. Then you let that thought go. You look back at the document, the code, the design file, and you notice it's different. The phantom has been looked at. It can't haunt you from the shadows anymore. The work is still there. The challenge is real, but the distracting dread has quieted. Your mental energy isn't split anymore. It's not partly here and partly in some scary future. It can all go into the action you can take right now. That's the trade. A small amount of time spent thinking about the future buys back a much larger amount of time lived in the present. You trade 5 minutes of structured thinking for hours of focus. So after you do a visualization, just pause. Ask, where does your mind want to settle now? Once you've calmly watched the imagined storm, doesn't it just seek the solid ground of now? The breath, the task, the light in the room, the practice doesn't make peace from nothing. It removes the obstacle to the peace that was already there. The obstacle was your absence, your mind being exiled into a tomorrow that doesn't exist. By visiting that tomorrow on purpose, you end the exile. You let yourself come home. This isn't the opposite of positive thinking. It's something else, something more solid. People get confused about this. A lot of modern self-help pushes a forced optimism. The idea that if you just focus on the positive outcome, you can attract it, like the law of attraction, manifestation. Those ideas say dwelling on the negative is counterproductive. Even harmful, Stoicism takes a different route. It doesn't ask you to deny how harsh reality could be. It asks you to accept it, to look right at it. And in that clear-eyed acceptance, you build a strength that forced optimism can't give you. One approach tries to wish difficulty away, the other prepares you to walk through it. One can make you fragile when reality shows up, the other builds resilience because it welcomes reality, all of it. Seneca talked about this directly. He wrote that we should anticipate not just common changes in fortune, but its violence. We shouldn't just hope difficulties pass us by, we should square up to them. He said someone who has prepared for poverty is never poor because they've already made peace with the idea. Their sense of self isn't tied to their bank account. That's a long way from just repeating affirmations about wealth. It's about internal fortitude, not external circumstance. The Stoic isn't visualizing wealth to attract it. They're visualizing the loss of wealth to immunize themselves against the fear of that loss. The goal isn't to change the world with your thoughts. It's to change your relationship to the world. No matter what it brings, you can see the practical difference in how you'd prepare for something, like a job interview. The pure positive thinking approach might be to visualize only the perfect scenario. You see yourself answering every question perfectly, the interviewers smiling, the job offer coming right away. You focus all your mental energy on that one ideal outcome. Confidence has its place, of course, but the Stoic would add another layer. They would also deliberately visualize a tougher path. They'd imagine a question they can't answer right away. They'd picture a panel that seems skeptical or bored, and then, in their mind, they'd rehearse their calm response, taking a breath, acknowledging the difficulty. Pivoting to their strengths, keeping their composure. This isn't expecting failure. It's preparing for reality, because reality is rarely a perfect script. By rehearsing your poise in the face of friction, you're not attracting friction, you're building a skill, the skill of staying effective under pressure. That skill is valuable whether the interview is easy or hard. This distinction matters because avoidance has a cost. When we train ourselves to push away any negative thought, we aren't making those thoughts disappear. We're pushing them into the shadows of our mind where they grow. Then, when a real setback happens, we have no practiced response, we only have shock. And the crumbling of that fragile, positive-only facade. The Stoic method brings those thoughts into the light. It examines them, it learns from them. It uses them as training for the soul, so you might take a quiet moment. In your own life, when you face a challenge, what's your instinct? Do you avoid thinking about the negative possibilities? Do you focus only on the best case? What's the hidden cost of that avoidance? Does it leave you more anxious? Because a part of you knows you're unprepared for anything but perfection. Or does it lead to a brittleness, where a single setback feels like a total personal failure? There's no judgment here, it's just an observation. The invitation is to consider that true confidence might not come from denying difficulty, but from knowing deep down that you've already met it in your mind. And you have a map for the terrain. That kind of confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to shout positive mantras. It just knows it can handle what comes. The final stage is a deep love for reality, not just tolerance but an active embrace. The Stoics aimed for this. Nietzsche gave it a name we know, Amor Fati. A love of your fate, that's what this mental work can build. It goes past accepting difficulty into finding value, maybe meaning, in whatever happens. In loss, in hardship, because you've walked those paths in your mind so many times, they stop feeling like foreign, terrifying places. They become familiar ground. Part of the landscape of a full life. By facing these possibilities in thought, you're not practicing pessimism, you're practicing intimacy with reality. All of it, you're getting to know the full range of experience, not just the pleasant parts, and in that familiarity, fear gets smaller. What's left is a clearer view. You start to see challenges not as random punishments, but as threads in a bigger tapestry, threads you can weave into strength, into wisdom. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to this. He wrote about accepting everything as necessary for the world, about seeing every obstacle as fuel for your own virtue. That's Amor Fati in action. It's saying yes to life. All of it, think of someone who's practiced visualizing a business failure. They've walked through that scenario, the financial recalibration, the talks with partners, the personal reassessment. If it actually happens, their experience is different. It's not a shocking ambush. It's a place they've already visited in a way. They can meet it with a quieter mind. A mind that might think this too. This is part of the story. Now, what does this make possible? What can I learn here that success couldn't teach me? This isn't celebrating failure. It's a deep trust in the process of growth, which often needs friction. This shift changes your whole relationship with your past. Every hardship you've lived through stops being just a scar. It becomes evidence of your capacity. It becomes a lesson, integrated. So reflect for a moment. Bring to mind one past difficulty, a relationship that ended, a goal you missed, a time of real struggle. Instead of focusing on the pain, ask yourself, what's one reason, even a small one, to be grateful for its role in your story? Did it show you a hidden strength? Did it turn you toward a better path? Did it deepen your empathy? Finding that single point of value is an act of Amor Fati. It's loving the whole of your fate, not just the chapters you'd have written. It's the final preparedness, a heart ready to find meaning, no matter what comes next. The original texts show us how they practiced. We can look at Seneca. He wrote a letter about exile. He told his friend to rehearse it mentally. Set aside a few days, he said. Be content with the cheapest food, the coarsest clothes. That was his fire drill. He wasn't expecting to be banished. He was immunizing his peace against the fear of it. By choosing a simpler life voluntarily, he took the terror out of exile. The loss of status, the different scenery, the plain meals, these things became familiar. Manageable, his goal was to prove something to himself, that his happiness was internal, not tied to a city or a lifestyle. The method was deliberate discomfort, temporary. The insight was about fear. We fear what we haven't confronted. Then there's Marcus Aurelius. His meditations have a different texture. They're filled with rehearsal, but often about impermanence. He would list famous people from history, all gone now. Alexander the Great and his mule driver, he wrote, both came to the same end. This wasn't morbidity. It was calibration. By reminding himself of time's leveling effect, he aimed to shrink his ego, to reduce the anxiety over reputation and legacy. His intent was to focus on virtuous action now. Because the applause or the criticism would soon be silent, his method was the historical review. The insight was about scale. All our strivings are set against a vast, quiet backdrop. And Epictetus, he started from having lost everything as a slave. His advice cuts to the core. With everything that pleases you, he said, remember to tell yourself what it is. Start with the smallest things. If you're fond of a ceramic cup, remind yourself it's a ceramic cup. Then if it breaks, you won't be disturbed. He applied this to people too. When you kiss your child, whisper to yourself they are mortal. That might be the most startling example. His intent wasn't to spoil the moment with dread. It was to preserve its purity from future shock. The method was the mental footnote. The insight was about disturbance. It comes from surprise, from forgetting the true, fragile nature of things. We can hear the practice directly from Seneca's morning ritual. He wrote about beginning each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, selfishness." Then he explains why, because these people don't know the difference between right and wrong. Notice the structure. He doesn't say, "If I meet these things," he says, "I shall be meeting them." This is negative visualization as daily expectation. He preemptively forgives the world for being the world. His peace isn't based on people being good to him. It's based on his prepared response to their flaws. That's the shield being raised at dawn. Take Seneca's exile rehearsal. Find a modern equivalent. It's not about literal banishment. It's about any foundational change that feels like a loss of place, a sudden job loss in a career you've built for decades. The Stoic exercise would be to periodically contemplate that possibility, not to dwell in fear but to ask questions. What is the core of my value if that title is gone? Could I live on less? What simpler, meaningful work could I do? By mentally walking through that scenario, you do what Seneca did. You separate your sense of worth from the external circumstance. You affirm that your capability and character remain, even if the platform changes. Or consider Marcus Aurelius and his historical figures. A modern parallel might be scrolling through social media, seeing the highlights of peers. The exercise would be to pause and remember, all these curated lives, all these achievements and dramas are fleeting. In 100 years, what will any of it matter? This isn't meant to make effort feel pointless. It's meant to free you from comparison and anxiety, to let you pursue your work not for a permanent monument, but for its own intrinsic worth right now. So these textbook examples, Seneca's voluntary simplicity, Marcus Aurelius's historical perspective, Epictetus's whispered reminders, which method resonates most? Is it preparing for daily friction, contemplating the bigger picture, or attaching a gentle note of realism to the things you love? Each one is a different door into the same prepared mind. The Stoics considered this a duty for anyone responsible for others. This mental preparation wasn't about retreating from the world. It was a foundation for leadership, for being a steady force when everything else was shaking. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, didn't practice this just for his own peace. He did it to carry the weight of millions. His private writings come back to this. He reminded himself of his duty to the Roman people. He thought about the burdens of leadership, the potential for famine, for conflict, for health crises sweeping through cities. By walking through these possibilities in his mind, he wasn't indulging fear. He was building a reservoir of calm. So if a crisis arrived, his first reaction wouldn't be the panic of a surprised man. It would be the measured response of a prepared leader. His clarity could then become the clarity of the court, the generals, the people looking for guidance. A leader's composed mind is a public good. This shifts the practice from a personal tool to a social one. When you're responsible for others, your emotional state becomes a kind of weather system for them. Your anxiety creates a low-pressure front of worry. Your calm becomes a stable climate where clear thinking can grow. The Stoic leader, by rehearsing adversity in advance, aimed to become that stable climate. They prepared to meet collective hardship not with reactive emotion, but with reason and compassion that allowed for decisions aimed at the common good. Not decisions made from personal terror or self-preservation. It's the difference between a captain who has mentally rehearsed a storm and one seeing the waves for the first time. The crew's confidence hinges on that preparation. You can see this in a modern context far from an emperor's throne. Consider a team leader facing a high-stakes project. The anxious leader might hide their worries, but the tension leaks out. It's in a clipped email, a distracted glance in a meeting, a tendency to micromanage out of fear. Now imagine that same leader using the Stoic exercise. Before a major milestone, they sit quietly. they visualize a realistic setback. A key feature fails testing. A major client raises a serious objection. They walk through the scenario calmly. They see themselves gathering the team, acknowledging the problem without blame, focusing the group on solution-oriented questions. They rehearse their own tone, steady, forward-looking. By visiting that possibility in their mind, they disarm its power to hijack their leadership in the moment. When or if a problem arises, they can access that rehearsed composure. Their team will see a leader dealing with a difficulty, not a leader being emotionally overwhelmed by one. That steadiness is contagious. It turns a crisis into a puzzle the team can solve together. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself about the connection between his mortality and his duty. He said you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That seems like a personal reflection on death, but for him it was directly tied to leadership. Knowing his time was limited and uncertain pushed him to act with justice and diligence now, not to be frantic, but to be fully present and effective in his role. His mental preparation for his own end was what fueled his purposeful action for the community. He saw his life as a service, and contemplating its end ensured he didn't waste a day of that service. So bring this closer to your own sphere of influence. How could practicing this mental rehearsal make you a more stable presence for your family, your friends, or your colleagues? You don't need an empire. Your community might be a household, a group of friends, a few co-workers. When you mentally prepare for the small storms, a child's disappointment, a friend's crisis, a work deadline crumbling, you aren't inviting trouble. You are building an inner anchor so that when those winds blow, you can be the one who remembers the plan, who speaks calmly, who asks the useful next question. Your prepared mind becomes a shelter for others, simply by not adding its own storm to the situation. That is shared resilience. It starts within a single person's quiet contemplation, and it radiates outward, steadying the world immediately around them. Premeditatio malorum works best with other Stoic disciplines. It's not a single technique. It's one part of a larger mental training system. The Stoics didn't practice negative visualization alone. They combined it with other exercises. Each one reinforced the others, building a kind of fortress for the mind. That holistic approach is what turns a helpful trick into a way of life. A single tool fixes a specific problem, but a full toolkit builds something that lasts. Your mental preparedness becomes more resilient, more flexible. When it's supported by multiple pillars, so consider journaling, the evening review. You spend a few minutes in the morning rehearsing a potential hardship. The evening gives you a chance to reflect. You can write down what you visualized. More importantly, you write down the insights that came up. Did you discover a hidden resource? Did you notice your attachment to a particular outcome softening? Journaling captures those moments of clarity. It turns a mental exercise into a recorded lesson. Marcus Aurelius's meditations are the example. That's his private journal, filled with rehearsed acceptances, reasoned responses to imagined and real challenges. He did the work and then wrote it down to deepen the imprint. Writing forces a different kind of clarity. It slows the mind, demands coherence, so a practical combination is simple. After a session of negative visualization, take 2 minutes. Jot down the single most useful thought that emerged, just a sentence that creates a feedback loop. Your mental training informs your reflection. Your reflection solidifies the training. Then there's voluntary discomfort. This aligns with Seneca's exile rehearsal. You take the mental preparation into the physical world. In a small, controlled way, you might take a cold shower, skip a meal, sleep on a firmer surface. The goal isn't masochism. It's to prove something to yourself, to physically demonstrate that you can handle less, that your comfort is not your master. When you pair this with negative visualization, the effect is profound. You've already walked through the idea of losing comforts in your mind. Now, by voluntarily setting one aside for a short time, you reinforce that mental pathway with lived experience. You build a somatic memory of resilience. The fear of hardship loses its grip because you have a recent, tangible memory of navigating a minor version of it. With choice and composure, the mind and body learn together that you are more adaptable than you assumed. Another partner is the view from above, the Stoic exercise of expanding your perspective. You mentally zoom out from your immediate concerns. You see your city from above, then your country, then the planet hanging in space. You contemplate the vast sweep of time, the countless lives that have come and gone. This practice provides essential context for negative visualization. When you're rehearsing a personal loss, it can feel all-consuming. The view from above gently reminds you of scale. Your challenge, however real, is one thread in an immense tapestry. That doesn't diminish its importance to you, but it can drain the drama and panic from it. It turns a catastrophic personal event into a difficult human experience, one of millions unfolding simultaneously across the world and throughout history. That cosmic perspective, as Marcus Aurelius often sought, is the antidote to self-absorption in suffering. It allows you to face your rehearsed scenarios not with a sense of unique victimhood, but with a dignified, shared humanity. The Stoics saw all these practices as paths toward the same destination: virtue, living with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. The exercises weren't ends in themselves. They were training drills for the soul, designed to strengthen your character so you could act rightly no matter the external circumstances. Negative visualization trained your courage and temperance by facing loss. Journaling trained your wisdom through reflection. Voluntary discomfort trained your temperance and resilience. The view from above trained your wisdom and justice by connecting you to the larger whole. Together, they formed a curriculum for human excellence. You might try a combined exercise this week. In the morning, use negative visualization on a specific concern. At noon, engage in a tiny act of voluntary discomfort related to it. If you worried about financial strain, perhaps prepare a simple meal from pantry staples instead of ordering out. In the evening, journal one sentence about what the day's practices revealed, and before bed, spend 1 minute with the view from above. Picture your concern as a small light on a vast, dark continent. Notice how each discipline supports and deepens the others. The mental rehearsal feels more grounded after a physical act. The journaling gives it structure. The expanded perspective offers peace. So, reflecting on this ecosystem of practices, which other Stoic discipline feels most natural for you to pair with negative visualization? Is it the concrete clarity of journaling, the embodied proof of voluntary discomfort, or the liberating scope of the view from above? Each connection you make strengthens the entire network, weaving a safety net for your peace of mind that is far stronger than any single strand could ever be. A lot of people hear this and think it sounds depressing. That's a fair first impression. To deliberately think about loss or failure or hardship, it seems like you're training your mind for gloom, but that's a misunderstanding. There's a line between pessimism and preparedness. The Stoics walked that line. Pessimism is an expectation. It's the belief the worst will happen, and it often comes with a sense of helplessness. It's a conclusion about the world. Stoic negative visualization isn't a conclusion, it's a rehearsal. It doesn't believe the worst will happen, it just acknowledges that it could. And in that acknowledgement, you find not helplessness but a sense of agency. One outlook saps your power, the other builds it. The difference is in the posture. A pessimist looks at a storm cloud and says, "See, I knew it would rain, everything is ruined." Their energy goes into resignation, into complaint. The Stoic, having visualized the rain, already has an umbrella, or has made peace with getting wet. Their energy goes into adaptation. One is passive, a victim of the weather. The other is active, a navigator of conditions. That's why the ancient texts frame this not as gloomy thinking, but as an act of courage. It takes courage to look at reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. Seneca wrote about this. He said we should strip things of the glamour our imagination gives them, see them for what they are. That clear-eyed vision is the opposite of the pessimist's vision. The pessimist sees a simplified, frightening story. The other sees a complex, manageable reality. You can see it in a practical example. Two people are about to give a public talk. The pessimist thinks, I'm going to forget my words, my voice will shake, everyone will think I'm a fool. That thought paralyzes, it leads to avoidance. Or to a self-fulfilling prophecy. The person practicing Stoic preparation thinks, I could forget my words, my voice could shake. If that happens, I will pause. I'll take a breath and find my place. My value isn't determined by this single moment. That thought leads to calm rehearsal, to practicing the talk while also practicing composure for the stumbles. Both people are thinking about a negative possibility, but one is building a prison of fear, the other is drawing a map for freedom. The core of it is this. True pessimism is a surrender to external events. It says the world is bad and I am at its mercy. The Stoic exercise is a declaration of internal sovereignty. It says the world is unpredictable, but my judgment and my response are my own. By facing the full spectrum of possibility, you are not agreeing with the worst of it. You are simply refusing to be blindsided by it. You take the terrifying unknown and make it a known quantity in your mental landscape. Once it's known, even if it's difficult, it loses its capacity for terror. So pause and feel into that distinction. When you've tried this, did it leave you feeling heavier, burdened by the thought of what could go wrong, or did it leave you feeling lighter? As if you had quietly placed a difficult truth on a shelf where you could see it, instead of letting it hide in the shadows behind you. Does this practice feel like giving in to gloom? Or does it feel like taking back a measure of control from a chaotic world? That internal answer is the real test. The goal is never to cultivate a joyless outlook. It's to clear away the fear of loss so that the joy of what you have can be experienced fully, without the silent whisper that it could all be taken away. That whisper is what true pessimism feeds on. This practice aims to silence it, not by denying its message, but by answering it with a quiet, prepared mind. The Stoics took that idea all the way. Memento Mori, remember you must die, which sounds like the darkest thought you could have, but for them, it wasn't morbid. It was the deepest form of negative visualization, the ultimate rehearsal. By holding the fact of their own death in mind, they wanted to break the trance of daily life. To burn off the trivial stuff, to see with total clarity what actually mattered. This wasn't about fear, it was about love, a fierce love for the time they had. Marcus Aurelius came back to this thought again and again. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that decide what you do, what you say, what you think." He wasn't talking about a frantic rush, he meant a filter. If this day, this hour, could be the last bit of conscious experience you get, how would you fill it? Would you fill it worrying about a rude comment from yesterday? Or would you fill it with kindness, with purpose, with being here? The remembrance of death was supposed to be that lens. It makes procrastination impossible. It makes pettiness feel like a waste of your attention, your energy, your breath. They'd often keep physical reminders. A skull on the desk wasn't a Gothic prop, it was a tool, a prompt, a quiet whisper in a busy room saying, this isn't a rehearsal, this is the show, your one and only show. You don't need a dramatic symbol. It could be a stone on your windowsill, a tree you pass every day, any ordinary object you give that meaning to. Every time you see it, it asks the same silent question. Are you living right now, or are you waiting to live? The practice cuts through indecision. Take a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. The usual fears come up. What if it goes badly? What if they're upset? Now put the Memento Mori filter on it. If your time were short, would you let that misunderstanding sit there? Would you leave those words unsaid? The potential awkwardness gets smaller. The importance of a clear, honest connection gets bigger. Your motivation changes. It shifts from avoiding discomfort to honoring the relationship. This works for creative work too. That project you keep putting off, telling yourself you'll start when you have more time, more skill. The remembrance whispers, you have today, you have this hour. What small, brave step can you take right now? It dissolves the myth of endless tomorrows. It puts the value right in the present moment, so consider that prompt. If you lived today as if it were significant, not just another Tuesday, what one thing would you do differently? Would you call the person you've been thinking about? Would you begin the thing you've been dreaming of? Would you just sit and listen, really listen to someone you love? The power of this visualization isn't in being preoccupied with the ending. It's in a fierce, grateful celebration of the middle, of the story that's still going. It uses the boundary of the page to give shape and urgency to the sentences we're writing now. By remembering the story ends, we try to make every chapter count. If you tend toward anxiety, this practice needs careful adjustment. It's a powerful tool, but like any tool, it has to fit the person using it. For a mind already under stress, the point isn't to add more weight. You're trying to build something lighter, more resilient. That means adapting the old method for how we live now, where the baseline of stress is already high. The principle stays the same, but the approach gets gentler, more compassionate. The aim is still tranquility, what the Greeks called ataraxia, a quiet mind. If the visualization causes distress, you've missed the point. That's a sign to step back, to soften the exercise, not push through. This isn't about enduring mental torment. It's about navigating skillfully toward peace. So the first adaptation is to start incredibly small. The Stoics talked about contemplating evils, but for a stressed or anxious mind, you have to redefine that word. Your evil isn't a major catastrophe. It's a minor inconvenience, a traffic jam on your commute, a forgotten lunch, a rainy day when you planned a walk. You pick a scenario with a tiny emotional charge, not a paralyzing one. The goal is to practice the process of calm rehearsal, not to confront your deepest fears on day one. You're building the mental muscle with a light weight, not trying to lift the maximum load right away. That careful scaling is an act of self-compassion. It respects where you are now but still invites growth. Always use a timer. 2 or 3 minutes is plenty. That creates a firm container for the exercise. It tells your anxious mind this is a brief, controlled visit. We are not moving in. When the timer sounds, you consciously let the thought go. That boundary is crucial. It stops the rehearsal from spilling over into rumination. It turns the practice from an open-ended worry session into a focused, time-bound drill. You're the director calling cut. The scene is over. That simple act reinforces your control over the process. And you must always end with the gratitude step. That's non-negotiable for a gentle approach. After your brief visualization of a minor loss, you immediately pivot. You bring your full attention to the present reality. The traffic is flowing right now. You have food available. The sun is out at this moment. You take a deep breath and feel a genuine appreciation for that simple fact. That step closes the loop. It makes sure the net effect of the exercise is a positive shift in attention from a potential lack to a present abundance. It transforms the energy from apprehension to thankfulness. The Stoic ideal was a mind undisturbed by external events. Forcing yourself through distressing visualizations creates internal disturbance, which defeats the whole purpose. The practice is a means to an end. That end is peace. Take someone with health anxiety. The thought of a serious diagnosis might be overwhelming. A gentler approach would never start there. It would begin with visualizing a mild, common cold. You'd walk through the minor inconveniences, the stuffy nose, the tiredness, the need for rest. you'd rehearse your calm response, making tea, adjusting your schedule, being kind to yourself. Then you'd let that thought go and feel profound gratitude for your current clear breathing, your present energy. You've practiced the Stoic response, acceptance and adaptation, on a scale that feels safe. You've built the neural pathway without triggering the panic alarm. Over time, this builds a genuine confidence, a confidence that comes not from avoiding thoughts of illness, but from knowing you have a calm, practiced method for meeting minor health disruptions. That confidence itself becomes a layer of resilience. So what's the smallest, safest loss you can visualize to start building this muscle? It might be as simple as your morning coffee going cold before you can drink it. Visualize that minor disappointment for 30 seconds, then feel the warmth of the cup in your hands right now. That tiny cycle contains the entire philosophy. It's a rehearsal for life's small irritations, followed by a deep savoring of the ordinary gift in front of you. This gentle start isn't a lesser practice. It's the wisest way in. Building your mental citadel begins not with staring down sieges, but with calmly repairing a single, quiet stone in the wall. Measuring success in a mental exercise, it's not something you get a certificate for. The proof is quieter. You feel it in the texture of your days. When you've been doing negative visualization, you start to notice shifts. One sign is you spend less time worrying about a specific thing. The topic you used to circle for hours picking at it, now it gets a few minutes of structured thought. And then you can let it go. You've already visited that territory on your own terms, so your mind doesn't feel the need to sneak back there. It's the difference between a song stuck on repeat and a melody you choose to hum. You've reclaimed the remote control for your attention. Another indicator is a feeling of familiarity when small problems come up. A setback at work, a change in plans, some friction in a relationship. Instead of that first flash of panic, you might feel a quiet recognition. A thought arises, I've already thought this through. I know how to handle this. The situation isn't easy, but the emotional shock is gone. You've disarmed the surprise. That's an echo of the Stoic ideal. The person who remains undisturbed not because they're numb, but because they've prepared. You're not a sage, but you're building the walls. You feel steadier in small storms because you've practiced standing in the wind. Spontaneous gratitude becomes more frequent. This isn't forced. It's a sudden, warm awareness in an ordinary moment. You're washing dishes and you feel appreciation for the hot water, the clean plates, the quiet kitchen. You see a loved one and your heart swells with thankfulness that they're here. This is the fruit of all those mental contrasts. By regularly contemplating absence, you've trained your brain's pattern recognition to highlight presence. Your mind starts scanning for gifts instead of just threats. The world doesn't change, but your way of seeing it does. You can see it in a practical scenario. Imagine a planned event gets cancelled last minute. The old reaction might be disappointment, irritation, a sense of wasted time. But if you had briefly visualized that possibility earlier, just a passing thought about what you'd do if plans fell through, your reaction is different. You feel the disappointment, but it doesn't hook you. It passes through quickly. You might even feel relief because you have a backup plan, even if it's just a quiet evening at home. You adapt without the inner drama. That adaptability is resilience in action. It's the mental muscle finally showing its strength. The Stoics measured progress not by what they acquired, but by what they could endure with a peaceful mind. Epictetus said progress is about bringing your desires and aversions into harmony with nature. When you desire only what's within your control, your own virtue, your reasoned response, and you're averse only to compromising that, you're making progress. These signs are the footprints of that harmony. Less internal conflict, more alignment with reality as it is. So take a quiet inventory. Can you identify one area where you already feel a sense of prepared resilience? Maybe it's your commute where traffic jams no longer ruin your morning. or at work where criticism lands not as a personal attack but as useful data. Or in a relationship where a minor disagreement doesn't spiral because you've made peace with the fact that people you love will sometimes see things differently. That pocket of calm, that space where you feel ready, is your evidence. It's the quiet proof this practice is working, rewiring your responses from the inside, building a peace that isn't dependent on everything going right. Years of this kind of mental training, they make you someone who's fundamentally at home, not because the world is safe, it's because you've learned to navigate the uncertainty. With a kind of quiet courage, the long-term benefit, it isn't one single moment of triumph, it's a reshaping, a cumulative reshaping of your entire emotional landscape. Your default response to a challenge, it slowly shifts from fear to curiosity. A problem arrives, and instead of a knot in your stomach, you feel a click in your mind. A recognition, here's something to understand, here's a place to apply what I've practiced. The unknown becomes less of a threat, more of a terrain to be explored. That rewiring is the real gift to your future self. It's building an inner citadel, stone by mental stone, until you have a place of peace, a place no external event can breach. Your default state shifts too, from one of wanting to one of appreciating. You stop living in the gap between what you have and what you desire. You start living in the vivid reality of what's already here. The morning light on the floor, the taste of a fresh apple, the sound of a loved one's laugh, these aren't background noise anymore, they become foreground. They become the substance of your day, that profound gratitude for the ordinary. It's the other side of the coin, the other side of preparedness. By having mentally rehearsed loss, you're freed. Freed to fully love what you have without the clinging fear of losing it. Your joy becomes clean, unburdened by that silent anxiety. This is the Stoic vision of eudaimonia. A word often translated as happiness or flourishing, but it means something deeper. It's a life of well-being that comes from living with virtue and wisdom. It's not a life free of pain. It's a life where pain does not define you, where your peace is sourced from your own character, not from the temporary arrangements of your circumstances. The long practice of negative visualization, it's a direct path toward that. It cultivates the wisdom to see things as they are and the courage to face them as they come. You can see it in the grace of certain older adults. They meet life's inevitable losses, the passing of friends, changes in health, the shifting of roles. They meet them not with bitterness or shock, but with a dignified acceptance. There's a wisdom in their eyes, and it isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about having made peace with the questions. This often isn't luck. It isn't a placid personality. It's very often the result of a lifetime of subtle mental preparation. They have, in their own way, been doing the rehearsal. They've long understood the temporary lease on all things, and so when the lease is up, they are saddened. But not shattered. They are able to grieve with love, not with terror. They can look back on a shared history with pure gratitude because they never took it for granted in the first place. Their emotional stability is a deep-rooted tree, weathered by storms but still standing because its roots have grown accustomed to the wind. So project yourself forward. What kind of 80-year-old do you want to be? Do you want to be brittle, surprised by every ache and change, clinging to a past that is gone? Or do you want to be resilient, present for whatever life still offers, able to find wonder in a sunset and peace in a quiet room? The person you become at 80 is being built by the thoughts you practice at 30. At 40, at 50, this mental training is how you start building that wise, grateful future self today. It's the quiet, daily investment, an investment in a legacy of inner strength. One that promises not a life without storms, but a soul that has learned to find its calm within them. Let's put together a simple weekly plan, something sustainable. Not a rigid checklist, but a flexible kind of framework, like a short daily walk for your mind, a weekly strength session, a monthly check-in. The goal is consistency in small things. That's a Stoic virtue. It's about building the habit, not about perfect, draining sessions. Start with your daily minute. That's your mental hygiene. Each morning, maybe right after you wake up, give it 60 seconds. Pick one small friction point your day might have. A long line at the coffee shop, a tedious meeting, a colleague's predictable complaint. Briefly visualize it happening, then visualize your calm response. You take a breath, you accept the delay. You find a useful question to ask. You meet the complaint with patience. You're not predicting a bad day. You're installing a program for composure. Then you let it go and start your day. Once a week, set aside a slightly longer session. 5 to 10 minutes is enough. This is your weekly drill. Here you choose one of your quieter, deeper concerns. A professional setback you fear, a difficult conversation you're avoiding, a financial what if that lingers. Walk through the realistic worst-case scenario with your reason as the guide. Ask the practical questions. If this happened, what's my very first step? Who could I talk to? What's one resource I've overlooked? The aim is to move the fear from a shadowy monster into a mapped terrain. You end this session by pivoting to gratitude. Acknowledge one thing in your life right now that this exercise makes you appreciate more deeply. Then, once a month, engage in a broader reflection. This isn't about a specific fear. It's about the nature of things. You might reflect on impermanence. Look around your living space and mentally note how every object, every relationship, every circumstance is temporary. Or practice a gentle form of Memento Mori, not with morbidity but with clarity. Consider the finite nature of your time here. Ask yourself, if I had 1 month less than I assume, what would I prioritize? What petty grievances would I release? This monthly reflection is the compass check. It ensures your daily and weekly practices are oriented toward what truly matters, not just managing daily stress. Your personal schedule might look something like this. Monday morning, your daily minute on handling a busy commute with patience. Thursday evening, your weekly 10-minute drill on the possibility of a project at work being cancelled. The last Sunday of the month, your broader reflection may be while on a walk, contemplating the changing seasons as a mirror for life's phases. The structure is there to serve you, not rule you. If you miss a day, simply begin again. The Stoics valued the effort, not the flawless record. So, based on what resonates with you, take a moment. Draft your own ideal weekly practice schedule in your mind. When will your daily minute fit most naturally? Which evening is quiet enough for your weekly drill? What monthly cue, a full moon, the first of the month, a regular quiet morning, could remind you to zoom out? This blueprint is yours to adapt. The power lies not in the plan itself, but in the quiet, repeated act of turning inward, building piece by piece an unshakable readiness. The journey from an ancient Latin term to a daily practice is complete. We've traced the path of premeditatio malorum, from its roots in Stoic philosophy to its place as a modern tool for building courage and a deeper gratitude. This isn't about historical curiosity. It's about a fundamental shift in how you meet your own life. The core message stands clear. Negative visualization is a proactive strategy for mental preparedness. It is not a passive surrender to fear. It is the deliberate choice to look at what could be so you can act wisely with what is. The key takeaways are practical. First, this practice reduces anxiety by disarming the power of surprise. When you've calmly visited a possibility, it loses its capacity to ambush you. Second, it builds genuine resilience. It trains your emotional immune system, creating a buffer so you can meet difficulty not with panic, but with a sense of readiness. And third, it actively amplifies appreciation. By creating a conscious contrast, it turns the ordinary comforts and connections of your life into vivid, felt gifts. You stop taking the background music of your existence for granted and start hearing the symphony. Epictetus, who understood hardship from the inside, offered a final, resonant thought on this. He said, "Don't demand that events happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do, and your life will go well." This is the ultimate goal of the practice. Not to control every outcome, but to cultivate a mind so prepared, so aligned with reality, that it can meet any outcome with grace. Your path forward starts small. Commit to the daily review step, 1 minute in the morning to rehearse a minor friction point and your calm response. That single minute is the seed from which a more resilient, grateful life can grow. We'd love to hear about your first steps. In the comments, share which application of negative visualization you'll try first. Is it preparing for daily friction, building resilience for a bigger challenge, or deepening gratitude for a specific person or ability? By sharing, you join a community of practice, learning from others on the same path. If you found this guide useful, subscribe for more practical Stoic wisdom. Together, we can continue turning ancient insight into modern strength, building lives of purpose and unshakable peace.